You know what I don't like? Recording roughly 15 minutes worth of audio for a video only to have to re-record it because Audacity, halfway through, decided to lower the microphone volume to 50%, so when I truncated it, the audio collapsed in on itself like a neutron star. I am not best impressed. Fuck you, Audacity. Now that I've got that grievance off my chest, today's subject, recorded for a second time, so let's see if I can get it up to where I had it last time and make all the points I wanted to make, not salty in the slightest, will concern a court case that has been ongoing for about 5 years. It is a case that has rather significant ramifications for 4 major supermarkets in the United Kingdom, and it is one that concerns the gender pay gap. Dun dun dun. No, it doesn't. People have used it as an excuse to talk about it and imply that it is somehow related, but actually no. No, it's actually concerning 2 different sectors, one moaning that they are the same as the other, and the other continuing with its job to give the others something to do so that they can get paid, because the others who aren't interested in the slightest in this and not affected by it are too busy working to give a damn about what the others who are complaining, 500,000 no less, are complaining about. One of the companies involved in this is called Asda. Now, Asda are one of the major supermarket chains in this country. They make reasonably good food and stuff. It's an okay place. It's where the lower income people go, because not everyone can afford Waitrose. We don't have one in my town, but thanks to internet shopping, I can get their stuff, and they do pretty good Mediterranean pork chops, if you're into that kind of stuff. Now, the case against them is worth about £8 billion. This is of course not just Asda, but also Sainsbury's, Tesco and I think Morrison's, which is about £16,000 for each person eligible to claim for unequal pay for doing what they claim to be the same job, or of, and this is from the court bit, of equal value. And we will certainly get to that part momentarily, because it does raise a rather interesting argument, and it is mentioned in a number of articles that have covered this, notably the BBC, who have done a fantastic job making it look as if it's a gender pay gap argument. So I thought I'd tackle that first. Because over the last 5 years, companies have had to be more transparent with their pay, which has then in turn led to people claiming some are not paying their employees equally. Companies like Ryanair, because most of the females aren't pilots, and most of the pilots are men. Naturally, the trolley dolly is not making as much as the pilot, but the pay discrepancy is there, and that needs to be addressed, everyone. Thankfully, if Labour get into power, it'll be addressed because everyone earning over a certain amount will just get taxed exactly that amount, so that everyone earns the same. Do I require my sarcasm sign for that? With Asda, most of their female workers work on the shop floor, stacking shelves and operating tills, whereas most of the men work in the warehouse. Now that's not all, hashtag not all, but this is a simple fact. Women are friendlier for the most part, and are better at faking interest and kindness than men. I can do it quite convincingly, but quite frankly, I found it to be mentally exhausting, having to give a damn what a customer wanted. I found learning apathy to be far more enjoyable. And this is where the case with Asda comes into effect, because it is the shop workers, the floor workers, who believe they should have equal pay for work of equal value with that of those in the warehouse. I'm going to state an obvious and open opinion about this now, my opinion no less. How we determine the value of those 2 jobs to be the same is dangerous, because you are now determining 2 vastly different sectors are the same because of one key element, and that be the shelf stacking. However, I would argue that unlike a shelf stacker on the shop floor, who may also operate a till, you do not need a license to operate your arm as it places a jar of Marmite on the shelf, or that vile Marmite cheese in the fridge, and the Vegemite in the bin, and you also don't need a license to operate a till. But there are elements within a warehouse where you do require a license, most notably for operating a forklift. Now yes, forklifts are quite simple to use, but they do require some concentration as accidents have been known to happen, and it is not as simple as simply stacking things in a warehouse. It is not the same job, which is physically more demanding than that of those on the shop floor. I want to make this point quite clear because courts in this country disagree with me. We could take this all the way back to the Employment Tribunal in 2016 that ruled against Asda, saying that shop workers who mainly work at checkouts or stacking shelves could compare themselves with staff who work in warehouses. With the customer service element, I tend to disagree, unless you're telling me all the physical work involved in working in a warehouse is considered equal somehow of value to that of somebody who interacts with the customer. Asda then appealed that on 10 different grounds, which in August of 2017, the Employment Appeal Tribunal ruled all points of their appeal unsuccessful, which then led to Asda to take the case to the Court of Appeal. Yeah, apparently we don't have just one hall of justice, which under the circumstances might actually be a good thing when you consider what people are trying to achieve. Thursday's ruling last Thursday, with the Court of Appeal denying Asda the right to appeal, has put Asda in a bit of a weird position, which Asda has now taken, or intends to apply to take this to the Supreme Court to appeal that ruling. Now there are 3 stages in an equal pay case, and only the first 2 are really relevant, to be honest. Are the jobs comparable? Shelf stacking, yes. Everything else, no. If the jobs are comparable, 1 point. Are they of equal value? How do you determine the value of a job? One that requires trolleys and customer service skills, or interpersonal skills with some minor lifting, and organisation, of course. You can't just replenish the stock, you must rotate it as well, and reduce when necessary, with that of the more physically demanding warehouse work. The third point is if they are of equal value, which I don't know how they're going to ascertain how it is of equal value. Is there a reason why the role should not be paid equally? I think most people, most companies would find it very hard to answer that question, because some would then just try and scapegoat it as a gender pay gap. Now, the GMB Union General Secretary Tim Roach has said, "We know we're not all the way there. There are more hurdles to jump in this process, and as always we remain ready to negotiate should Asda want to get round the table," with Asda replying, "Our hourly rates of pay in stores are the same for female and male colleagues, and this is equally true in our depots. Pay rates in stores differ from pay rates in distribution centres, because the demands of the jobs in stores and the jobs in distribution centres are very different. They operate in different market sectors, and we pay the market rate in those sectors regardless of gender." And I have to say, I tend to agree with Asda, as opposed to the GMB Union, who I assume is only really invested in this because the amount of money on the table is so much. Now, I do want to raise a point of concern when it comes to what this does. If Asda, Tesco, Morrisons and Sainsbury's are unsuccessful in this, provided Tesco, Sainsbury's and Morrisons continue in this, if they are unsuccessful, this sets a very dangerous precedent for different sectors based on something as minor as shelf stacking. We could easily take this further and say, well, 2 people working within some kind of administrative field, because they operate with computers and use paper and pens, they should be paid the same. Bearing in mind one could be a banker and the other could be a secretary. I know I've set a straw man up there, but I think you get my point. Most of you would get that point. How you are determining the value does set a dangerous precedent, and there is a consequence for that. You see, £8 billion potentially and more, 16,000 for every claimant, potentially, provided they all make the same claim, has a consequence, because that's a lot of money regardless of how big your company is, and that kind of hit would more than likely, unless you get the court to secure your job, end up with redundancies. Of the 500,000 people who are affected by this, how many of those jobs do you think are safe? A court cannot protect those jobs. So for £16,000, essentially 4 to 5 months good living before you have to go on job seekers allowance, provided your bills are reasonable, is it actually worth it? Now, if you were arguing from the position of actual gender pay discrimination, yeah, it's worth it, because, principles and everything. And of course, if it is actual discrimination, yes, but this is not that. This is something different. This is an argument of semantics based on 2 different jobs, which is why I don't agree with the 500,000 people who are being represented by Lee Day, who believe it is a major step forward in the fair pay battle. What's fair though? how do you determine fair? Because I'm starting to think the only way fair can really exist is if everyone, regardless of occupation, just earns the same amount because they do the same thing. If we're going to base it on that, I would very much like to have the same pay as T-Series, because even though I don't get the same views, we do the same thing, don't we? We put videos onto YouTube. It doesn't matter how much work they put into their content, debatably. I should get the same amount of money, surely. I would very much like to build my own Taj Mahal in Deal, because I can. Not that I want to. It would probably just end up being a curry house anyway. Was that a bit tongue-in-cheek on racism, perhaps? Before I finish, I realised why, after I was so salty at the start, why Audacity recorded quieter and quieter as my recording went on. Not this recording, the original one. That is just as long, kind of. No, it's not, it's shorter. This is shorter than the first one. I think I missed a few points, because every time I stopped and re-recorded another part, it automatically reduced the volume on the microphone. So to those who use Audacity, you may want to keep an eye on your microphone level, because apparently this happens. For reasons I don't know why. I'll look into it tomorrow. So I hope you all have a lovely Monday the 4th of February, and thank you all for listening.